Yeah, Heather was saying as we were walking up here that I dressed the part. This is my iPhone shirt that's been wiped. So it says it's obliterated.
So we're going to start this afternoon with our presentation, WhatsApp with your iMessage, dude. This one is going to cover all the things that you never really thought about with iMessage and WhatsApp. Predominantly, we use these all the time in our investigations, but the question always comes back to, well, yeah, but how did it get there? Or why is it not there? So we're going to try to figure out if we can find that out. But before we do that, Stacey, I got a little question for you.
Yes.
Did you know that there is an actor who was in Top Gun, specifically the volleyball scene of Top Gun, who would later go on to star with Tom Hanks in Castaway?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
awful.
sorry.
That is awful. I should just let you continue the presentation from here.
I have to have a little fun.
Yeah. So on that note, my name is Stacey Randolph. I am a director at Strauss Friedberg, now Aon Cyber Solutions. We go by both names, so whatever you want to call it. These are my babies, my two Akitas. The fluffy one is Piper, and the other one, who is missing an eye now, is Zeus. They're adorable and everything. Hobbies of mine are, in no order, mental health, self-care, advocating all of that. I've actually turned one of the bedrooms in my house into a home spa with a sauna. So I'm sorry, no one is allowed in my house. That's mine. Brisket, of course, Texas is great for brisket. All things animals, do not send me the 8-legged creepy crawler thingies. I will block you on Slack, sorry. And then we just hit last month the 5-year anniversary of DFIR. So that's exciting.
Not quite as exciting, but I'm Christopher Vance. I am the currently the Senior Technical Forensic Specialist at Magnet Forensics. I am a father to a pair of Control-C, Control-Vs, my twins. And, you know, I like tacos, Disney, long walks on the beach, and then pretty much anything done by Guy Fieri. Getting on with the actual point of this talk, I know it's been a while. We're going to talk about iOS's 2 most popular chat apps. And we're going to talk about Messages first, and then we're going to go over to WhatsApp. So why is Messages so big? Well, Apple says you have to use it. We don't really have a choice. But coming from an artifact company, I can tell you that WhatsApp is number 2 with that. But why these two together? They share a lot of the same functionality. They share the ability to share media, to share your locations, to do group messaging, and control replies and reactions. They both have a really bad habit of making data go away. So for iMessage, or the Messages app specifically, of course, Apple's going to force this as the default protocol for all of iMessages sent on iOS and of course macOS, but also all text messages. So SMS and MMS are forced through that same application. It's not like Android where you can actually pick and choose. Well, with that, that is going to give us a lot of different settings that are going to impact both Apple's own iMessages, but the predominant way that, well, most folks actually communicate when it comes to a phone anymore. Who would ever think about using a phone to call somebody? But the data for iMessage doesn't just exist in the one database that we all have come to know and trust. There's actually data outside of that database that can help you fill in some of the missing pieces. The database that we've all used for years is SMSDB. Now, this has not ever, as far as I'm aware, moved. Since the early days of iPhone OS, it has been in Private Var Mobile Library, SMS. The schema, of course, has changed quite a few times. This has always been available to us in an iTunes style backup or in an AFU or better file system. This may or may not be present in an iCloud backup, depending upon specific settings that we're going to evaluate today. There's a lot of tables. I mean, like a lot. In fact, there are probably about 7 tables that you're going to care about in every case. 4 of those tables are going to be the actual important data, but because Apple believes strongly in relational databases, many of those tables are not linked directly to each other. They have what are referred to as join tables, So the data is actually going to run through this other join table before they go over with that. Now, this does provide storage efficiency, but it also causes a lot of issues with deleted messages, specifically fragmentation. You'll recover pieces of the message, but not the whole picture. So how does Apple keep track of all these messages, especially when we have to deal with things like syncing between multiple devices and a cloud service? Apple does not care at all about the row ID of your database. And in two different devices that are both syncing to the same service, those row IDs are going to be totally different. What Apple cares about instead is the GUID value. This same pattern is used all over iOS, this 8-4-4-4-12 pattern. Apple's going to use this to uniquely track each message, regardless of what device it's actually sent to or sent from. This is going to be really important for tracking some of the reactions and replies, but then there's also dates and times. Now, Apple continues to annoy us with dates and times. They cannot make up their mind about how they're going to store dates and times in this database. Many moons ago, it was a Unix timestamp. Then it was an Apple time timestamp, and then it was Apple time in seconds with decimal points. And now it's actually stored for the most part in nanoseconds. But you may see a mixture of both nanosecond Apple time as well as second Apple time with multiple decimal points, depending upon the service that's used and the directionality, because both of those can impact which of the three timestamps in the database you're actually going to have. So how do we track replies? Well, one of the things that I wanted to look at first was multi-part messages, because every once in a while I have to text one of those green people, those Android users. And unfortunately, when I do that, it defaults down to an SMS. And when they send me a long enough message, that message can often get broken apart. So how does Apple put it all back together? This is where the GUID comes into play. And there is a function there, there is a column there in the database called reply to GUID. That reply to GUID shows you which message that was a reply to. Now, by default, the reply to GUID is just going to be the message that came before it in the database. However, there's a little bit more that goes into that part. Replies and threads, which came out a few versions ago, really kind of starts to confuse this a little bit. So visually, the user might see something like this on the screen where you have a line that says, oh yeah, I'm replying to this message, or and that could be a reply to that message, a reply to an image. It doesn't really matter. What Apple will track in the database is the GUID, the reply to GUID again, but what if you have a multiple thread of replies in a single message? How do you know which one was the beginning message there? Because Apple shows it visually on the screen. That's going to be the column thread originator GUID. This is important because if a user deletes a message, they may have deleted a message that still contains a reply. And you might be able to say, we know this was to a reply because the GUID is missing. And we can actually track that in there. Then we have reactions. You can like a message, you can unlike a message, or you can actually misclick and remove that reaction. Each one of these reactions is actually a separate record in the database. Visually, it's just a little circle, but in the database, it's an entire new record. And here's the problem. There's only one visible record per person at a time. So if somebody, say, likes an image, realizes, uh-oh, that was the wrong one to do, and then unlikes the image, puts the thumbs down, there's going to be a missing record in the database. Apple is going to say they liked that image. Oh, wait, no, they didn't. And they're going to say they did not like that image. You're going to see gaps in both the row ID as well as the GUID. On the screen, if you may be able to see this, we have this graphic in the middle, row ID 178 or 147, 148. But then down here at the bottom, we have 93, 95. That's because somebody decided to laugh at that image and then they removed the laugh. The removal of the laugh is tracked, but the actual originating laugh itself got dropped from the database. We also have expressive messages and balloons. And this is one of my favorite things that Apple's done. It allows me to send messages in a different way. Of course, my favorite one to do is to text somebody the words pew pew because it's, going to send the little space lasers out. Or you can text somebody like congrats, and that's going to generate the balloons and confetti, right? Well, each one of these things are tracked, but Apple is taking that a step further. You may have noticed when you send something to someone, it may generate almost like a preview window of what you're looking at, a preview of the website that you're looking at. That is referred to as Apple as a balloon, and you will actually see a binary P list embedded in the blob as part of this payload data. We can parse that out to get additional records, meaning that one of my favorite things to do in the world is carve the SMS database for binary P lists to see what really was there at one point in time. We can also send via Siri. Now, visibly, there is a record for incoming messages sent by Siri. But what if you have a distracted driving case where someone says, I didn't actually send that message, I used Siri to send it? Visibly on the phone, we would know. But in the database, inside of this, there is once again another embedded binary P list, which contains an identifier that lets us know incoming and outgoing is going to be sent by Siri. Group threads is where things get really complicated because there's no direct correlation between a single message and a user. I mean, there's the handle ID, great, but what happens when that handle ID actually reflects 0? Well, I didn't think row ID started at 0. They don't in this case, and in fact, 0 is a placeholder, which means I have an outgoing group message. With that outgoing group message, I've got to now jump through a bunch of different hoops to figure out who that message was actually to. The messages table itself is tied to a join table that joins the message to the chat. The chat itself tells me who that chat was between, which is joined to another join table, which tells me which handles are responsible for being in that chat, which is then tied to the handle table to tell me who was actually in that chat. This is why, for a lot of reasons, but a big one, when you have a group message and it is deleted, even if it's recovered, it may be very fragmented. There are a lot of broken pieces in this chain that some tools just can't recover. Well, while we're on the subject of group messages, what else can we do with them? We can actually modify them, again, as long as you're not talking to the green people, sorry. As long as you're talking to someone just using the iMessage protocol, you have a lot more functionality. I can rename a room, I can add a picture to the room, I can add new people to that chat without creating a new thread, and I can even remove people or someone can leave that thread. All of these things can be tracked, but at face value, it's going to reflect a null value in the text of the database. But by looking deeper at one of the many columns that Apple shows, we can actually see things like item type. Item type is going to actually help us see in this case that a group title was changed and a group message was renamed to moving company. The next message, also null, reflects a group action type of 1 with an item type of 3. This was the actual adding of an image to that group thread. Not always important in every case, but that's why we're here, is to find all the little weird stuff. Now, the other problem with that is that the picture is not necessarily stored where you would expect it to be. That picture is going to actually end up in the messages metadata. And so if they've added a picture of somebody that you're interested in, you have to look outside the standard attachments SMS database. This is a whole new area that we have to go to. When we invite new people to a group, when people leave a group, or we remove people from a group, we know who left, who joined, and who may have added them. We can track that with the other handle column that lets us know who was brought in to that group and by whom. We can actually go down all of these rabbit holes to see all of these little pieces of the conversation. But like when dealing with most of the things in the group message, the text value is going to reflect null. We cannot rely on just the text value to figure out all of these missing pieces. If I @ somebody, this is going to add a mention to that user, but it's not going to be stored as plainly and clearly in the database. It's actually going to be embedded within a blob of the database referred to as the attributed body. Now, there's been some great research already, but I'm telling you, this is the column to watch in iOS 16. More on that, I'm sure, but that is the column you're really going to want to watch in iOS 16. How about auto replies? We talked about distracted driving and sent by Siri, but what if someone says, oh, I never saw that text message. I had driving focus on. I couldn't have seen that text message. Well, Apple actually added with Focus the ability to silence incoming notifications. And then they got really passive aggressive about it and said, hey, this person has notifications silenced. Do you want to notify anyway? And when you say yes, it does the loud slam animation. I feel like Apple's being a little passive aggressive with that. But that is also tracked. 2 Boolean values in that message database reflect if that was an auto reply, if say for like a focus message, was it delivered quietly? And even if it was delivered quietly, did the user say, no, 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 I want to annoy them and actually press that message? I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, never.
Audio messages are another interesting one. And this is where we start to get into some of the weird preferences. Audio messages can be transmitted through the iMessage protocol, and these are going to be short audio clips, but they have a problem. They automatically expire after 2 minutes. As soon as it's played, it will expire from that device and send a message back to Apple to have that same audio file expire on the other device. So if I were to send Stacey an audio message and she listens to it, 2 minutes after that, it's deleted from both of our devices. If she or I choose to keep that message, the other party is notified, unless you go into the settings of your messages and actually change that from expire after 2 minutes to expire never. When that's done, a record, you can see here, private var mobile library preferences, com.apple.imessage.plist will actually save a value, automatically save audio messages enabled, set to true. And that value means they have at some point in time changed that, or they now have it set so that all audio messages are kept indefinitely. Attachments are messy upon themselves because they are tracked in the attachments table with, once again, no direct correlation. This particular table of the database is then going to be tied to the messages attachment. Now, Apple does like to do things efficiently. They may only store 1 copy of the file, even if you sent it to multiple people. But if you send a file in and out, you will have multiple records in this table for the same attachment file, because they like to use that to track directionality. By looking at the path of where that attachment is stored, you can gain context clues around that attachment, because it's going to be very different in the naming structure, whether that comes from the camera roll, or if I take it manually within the app, or if I do the good old copy and paste meme steal, right? Love doing that one myself. When that happens, it's actually going to go to a temp directory, and you can gain context clues around where the source was for that attachment image or whatever file it happens to be. Location data is also able to be sent here, and this is going to be stored differently depending upon if you're sharing location with another user or if you're sending a one-time stamp. A one-time stamp is actually saved as a vCard file, a VCF file in the attachments that reflects a URL pointing to Apple's Maps program with the latitude and longitude they were standing at. Now, this is nice because when you send it, it's not like pick your location. It actually just drops a pin. And you get a little bit of location data if that function was utilized. This is actually becoming a little bit more popular because Apple is trying to get users to do this with autocomplete. So you get the text message, where are you at? Here, click, and it'll actually drop that pin right in there. Please tell me somebody remembers that old phone commercial. How about these different preferences? We talked about the one for the audio message, but there's a lot of different preferences for iMessage to track. Read receipts. Some people have read receipts turned off, and I can't tell if they've actually read that message or not.
Sorry.
All of those are actually trackable, and you can track whether read receipts were turned on globally or per user. You can also track amazing things like, hey, was iMessage in the cloud enabled? Now in the UX, Apple gives you a nice little section that says, these are all the services that use iCloud. But there's not really like a matching plist that says, here's all the services that use iCloud. You have to go out and look at different files. And this one will tell you if iMessage in the cloud is enabled. If so, your iCloud backups will not contain a copy of the SMS DB, but that is managed per device. You can also figure out who has been pinned to the top of the message application, maybe frequent contacts, very similar to like tracking the favorites of a call function to figure out how long messages are supposed to be kept. Now, by default, messages are kept indefinitely, but you can actually set messages to automatically expire after 30 days or 365 days. If you change it, it will exist in this plist file. If there is no record in the plist file which shows this, they've never changed it from the default. It only exists in the plist file if they've changed it at some point in time, even if they change it back. We also have the ability to track SMS forwarding, and this is important because if SMS forwarding is turned on, it means that I may have text messages on a non-cellular device. I might have text messages existing on an iPad that's Wi-Fi only or a Mac device. And if that's the case, I just increase my chances of finding that data on another source. So where else can we look for this data? Knowledge C has been an amazing find. And I owe a lot of that thanks to Sarah for finding this data within Knowledge C. But we can actually take this deeper than just Knowledge C because Knowledge C was kind of the starting point for this. With Knowledge C, you can actually find what's called an application intent. And that application intent actually stores data about messages, including a lot of times the body of the message and who that was to and from and timestamps. The problem is that it's a blob with a plist inside of it, with a protobuf inside of it, with the actual message content. And it's not fun. It's possible, but it's not fun. But the best part is it doesn't just work for iMessages and SMS. Now, the other area that we like to track as part of this is the biome folder. And this has been getting a lot of popularity recently. The biome folder seems to be tied to similar to the Siri suggestions, but an Apple suggestion service. And it also tracks these application intents. The problem is that when you delete a message, not only will Apple delete that message from the database, they'll actually go back into Knowledge C and delete the application intent from there too. But they have not seemed to be doing that much to the biome folder. So from this binary file, we can pull out a protobuf with a plist in it, with sometimes another plist in it, with a protobuf in it that does eventually contain really important information like what application was used, the message content, and even the title of, say, the group. And while this works for iMessage and SMS, it also works for other apps like Snapchat, for example. Long after the snaps are gone, the biome still has them. And it also has apps like WhatsApp.
Thank you, Chris. My turn to talk now.
Naturally.
All right, so now that we're going to move on to WhatsApp, you'll see that there's going to be a lot of similarities between some of the functionality with iMessage and then also some of the other functionality with like Instagram or Facebook, because Facebook purchased WhatsApp. So they all kind of merge things. WhatsApp is still controlled by its own team, still does its own development, is still separate from Facebook, but Facebook's now their parent company. So like iMessage, it is a third-party application that does offer end-to-end encryption. That works with the messaging. It allows audio and video calls, group chats, status updates, a whole bunch of other stuff. There are separate settings for data retention for any of the backups, privacy settings, and you can do disappearing messages on it. That is a relatively newer feature. Most of the message data itself is thankfully stored in one database in the chat storage SQLite table or database itself, but there are tons and tons of other files and some new databases that are out there that still need research done on them that you can also examine. So starting with privacy settings, WhatsApp, this is similar to the Facebook-like functionality in that when you share something with somebody, you can set your privacy settings to share publicly with everyone. You can selectively share to your entire set of contacts. You can share with selective individuals within your contacts, Or you can just decide, I don't want to share this with anybody. So nobody needs to see when I was last online with WhatsApp. Nobody needs to see my profile photo or my bio or what groups I belong to. That's some of the stuff that you can share with other people if you choose to. Status updates. These are similar to Instagram stories and that they expire after 24 hours. But same thing, you can share those selectively with individual people. There is a giant P list, and we don't have a screenshot of the P list, just there is way too much data in it. You'll just trust me. But there is a P list that stores all of this information for you. So if you want to go find out, you know, was this person sharing their status update with a certain individual, or is there a likelihood that somebody could have seen this information out there? Check in the P list. You might be able to find it there. Backups. Backups can get tricky. There are a lot of settings in WhatsApp backups that also relate to iCloud backups. So you can set by default, auto backups are turned off. WhatsApp will not create a backup for you. You can change it to create a backup of all of your data 24 hours, after 1 week, after a month, 30 days, roughly 30 days. You can include whether you want videos in that backup or not. So if you have limited iCloud space, but you want to save your chat messages, maybe turn off backup with videos, and that will shrink your backup size down. You do have that option. The other option you have is you can encrypt that backup separately with a completely different password before that gets sent up to iCloud. Now, if you forget that password, you are out of luck. Apple cannot recover it. WhatsApp cannot recover it. It is gone. You cannot restore any of the data from that. The other thing to note is if you turn off backups, just tested this recently, if you turn off backups, that data gets removed from iCloud. It will not wait for the backup to be sent to iCloud. It won't wait for that next cycle to happen of your phone sending data. It does it on the spot immediately. So keep that in mind. If somebody has turned off backups or if somebody has deleted their account, it's going to delete all that stuff in WhatsApp right away. You don't have an extra few hour window of time. Disappearing messages. These can be set 24 hours, 7 days, 90 days. This is off by default. So by default, your messages are kept forever. You can change it. So if I am talking to Chris on WhatsApp and I decide I'm only gonna set disappearing chats to, or disappearing messages to 24 hours. That sets disappearing for me for 24 hours and for him for 24 hours within that chat. It does not apply to previous chats that we have had, so it is not a retroactive setting. It is only a setting that applies from the time that I set it going forward.
And this is actually different than iMessage, because where iMessage is retroactive,
Right,
WhatsApp is not.
right. So messages, you can't just set it and think, oh, this is like iMessage. You can't just set it and think, okay, I set it for 7 days, so everything older than a week is now going to be auto deleted. Sorry, doesn't work that way. Again, this is all also tracked in the giant P list. So if you want those settings, go there. All right, so chat storage SQLite database. This is where most of the messaging information is going to be located. There's 4 main tables here that I wanted to point out. There's data in most everything in there, and there's a lot of joining and messing with this table. So if you really like SQLite, go have fun with this. But the 4 main that I wanted to point out is the media item tracks all the attachments. So any of the media that gets sent back and forth. The ZWA message table does dates and messages. There's some other additional information in there, but that's the main place that you want to go for that. You can track the profile pictures. It correlates the WhatsApp ID number to the person's profile picture that they have set. And then the profile push name correlates their WhatsApp ID number with however you have their contact name set. So there's an option for there. So you can kind of match this back up. Timestamps. Timestamps are gross. I hate timestamps. Mac Absolute, Cocoa, Core Data, whatever you want to call it, it is iOS junk. Some of it's stored in nanoseconds, some of it is not stored in nanoseconds. It depends on the table you open in WhatsApp.
I've never heard those words before.
Yeah,
Depends.
it's a lot of fun, let me just tell you. Stickers and media. Again, these are in the media item table within that chat storage SQLite database. So these stickers that have been used in a chat. So I'm sending sticker, or I'm sending a picture, or a GIF. It's a GIF because you cannot send peanut butter in WhatsApp. So keep that in mind. I send that stuff to Chris. The ones that I have sent are tracked in the chat storage SQLite database. The entire list of stickers that I have available to choose from are in a completely separate database called stickers.sqlite. So when you're doing the analysis, don't get confused and think, oh, everything in this stickers.sqlite is something that has been sent to somebody else. That's not true. It's only the ones that are in the chat storage SQLite that have been sent to somebody else. Deleted messages are a lot of fun. There are multiple ways you can delete messages in WhatsApp. Deleting for a user, pretty standard. I mean, it deletes a message on your own device, won't delete a message on his device. Just disappears from the chat interface. It also will delete the row from the database. So you'll have gaps in your databases if stuff's been deleted. Delete for everyone is kind of a fun one. These can only happen if the message has been sent within 1 hour. After that, it's technically like an hour and like 7 minutes or some stupid, obscure time. It's approximately an hour. So when that expires, you no longer have the option to delete a message for everybody. So if I'm in a group message and I've got like 3 or 4 different people in that group message, and I send something out to somebody and I go, there's a typo in there and I really want to fix that. So I'm going to delete it for everybody. I can do that. And it deletes it from everybody's device, as long as everyone has the most recent version of the application. And if, say, somebody hasn't updated their phone yet, and they're still running an older version because they want to use it for testing and they're whatever, not that that's ever happened before. If I send that delete for everyone, it's not going to delete from his device, but it's not going to tell me that. I'm going to still think that it's been deleted from everybody, and I'm going to be none the wiser, and his device over here is still keeping everything. So keep that in mind. When you do, so if I am sending a message and I do the delete for everyone, in my table, it's going to replace that content, the body of that message, with you deleted this message. Or if he does the delete for everyone, it's going to say Christopher Vance deleted this message. And that's going to be replacing the body of the message in that database. Group chats, pretty self-explanatory. You can have a group of people in a chat. These do get tracked separately in the database. There is a group ID at g.us. looking at data from other countries, it doesn't appear that that g.us changes to like g.uk for somebody in the UK. That stays g.us. So just look for a g dot. For that, that'll be everything associated with a group. If it's just an individual chat in there, it's going to be S, your ID, which is your phone number, at s.whatsapp.net. So there's a way that you can kind of visually quickly tell what's an individual message, what's a group message. Status updates, again, these are the ones that expire after 24 hours. They're like Instagram stories. It's just some quick thing that you can throw up there. So those all get tracked. Blocked contacts. They are now, this has changed. So they are now being stored in that same SQLite database that we've been talking about under the blacklist item table. It's going to have the ID, phone number at s.whatsapp.net for the individuals who are being blocked. Does not, for safety reasons, does not send a block notice to the person being blocked. So if he keeps sending me iMessages and ignoring the focus that I have set on it while I'm in a meeting, and then I just decide to block him on all things, so he just stops bothering me. He's not going to get notice. It'll still look like messages are being sent out, so he can send a whole bunch of messages. It just looks like it's being unread. It never gets delivered.
And for my device, on both of those functions, it's still going to show delivered.
Yes, correct. Older versions of this will have the blocked contacts stored in blockedcontacts.dat. So if somebody has done, I have an iPhone, I get a new iPhone, a couple years later, I get another iPhone. As I'm doing that restore, I may have restored from an old version of WhatsApp from 5-6 years ago, and that data might still be on my device, so that you might have two different locations here. You might have a blocked contacts.dat file, and you might also have items in the blacklist item table. So look for both of those. Bonus, got a couple slides here, and then we're wrapping up. So bonus content, additional things to look at, the backed up key value.SQLite. This needs some more research done on it, but what I think it's doing is it has the cryptographical keys in there, data required for identification. What I think this is the additional password that is set, that a user sets on the backup before it gets sent to iCloud. And that gets stored there so that if that gets restored, it knows how to decrypt it. Contacts.SQLite. This is not the same address book, contacts table, contacts database for iOS. This is a completely separate database. These are the contacts that you have chosen to allow WhatsApp to view and have access to so that you can communicate with those people. Consumer version, it's the version of WhatsApp. Bonus content, you can, if you want to be fancy, you can set each chat to have its own wallpaper background, just for fun. Tracks that. The pw.dat file contains an encrypted password. What I think this is the two-factor verification pin that pops up on WhatsApp feels like every 5 minutes, every time I open WhatsApp, that stupid thing comes up. I think that's what that is. And then logs, if you need logs, if somebody's saying like, my app's not working, I wasn't able to use WhatsApp during this time, something happened, whatever, you have access to the logs to verify that information. So you can find us on Twitter, see Scott Vance or Forensics Woman, and there's Chris's blog on there as well.
Yeah, and we're actually planning a full series of blog posts on d24and6.com after this presentation that's going to contain all this information, cheat sheets, and even more stuff that we couldn't fit into the 40 minutes we had with 26 seconds to spare.
Right.
So keep a watch on that one. Probably in the next week or two, we'll probably start putting stuff up there. It'll probably be multi-part, but we'll give you all the shortcuts, cheat sheets, and all the things for you guys to enjoy.
Perfect.